recently challenged to make a Oner after watching 1917 with Roger Dickens and the one in Children of Men. This was a challenge that I was happy to accept and to see what I can do. But like any other film, there were challenges, and this is some of the things that we'll touch in. So on making this film, it's called Save the Kid. It's an action sort of film. It's an action crime drama families type of stuff. If you've watched Power Raising Canon, that's more of how I interpreted the script of what was going on. It's a story about a mother who's a drug dealer who tries to keep her child away from the life, but you know, how much can you do that? So that's why it's titled Save the Kid, is save your own son. It was written by a young filmmaker who's up and coming, so this was a great opportunity to work on a project where I'm not the director and DOP, just the DOP in this instance. So first off, I'll list out the gear that we used to film this. The director liked the Blackmagic color, so we first opted to use the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, but we didn't notice that the lenses that we were gonna use, because one of my friends was giving us his lenses, and he has the Blackmagic Pocket 4K, which is micro four thirds. So we didn't have the adapter for the lenses. We ended up opting for the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. This was my first time using a Blackmagic camera. To say, I think it was quite challenging coming from a Sony system, moving to Blackmagic, just trying to understand how the camera operates. I know, you know, we say the camera doesn't matter, but I think at a certain point it does. You just have to have an understanding. Everything else is the same, you know. What is the cameras? For me, the questions that I just had was, what's the native ISO, and can I get it on? It was on Global Shutter 180, and then I had it on, I think that's pretty much it. And then the lenses, I was filming mostly on the lowest that I could open it, just to blur it out, because we really didn't have a good production design, but we made what we had work. And then in terms of lighting, we didn't have much lighting. We were trying to rely as much as we can on natural light. But at the end of the day, the sun sort of dipped, and which is a challenge with these Oners, because you can't really light the space. You know, I feel like Oners work well in a studio, or if you're gonna do them in a house, then you're more likely gonna be using tubes and practical lights, and you need heavy equipment. In this instance, we didn't have all that, so we mainly had two Aperture 300Ds. We had an Amaran 200X and an Amaran 100X and two MCs on set, and then we had a fog machine, and I think that's pretty much most of the equipment. I don't really know much about sound, so. And then, so to film the first scene in the opening sequence when she's interrogating this man, to film this, we used, I think we have two lights, two main lights. The key light is just up out of frame, and because what the director had wanted at first was to use a practical light, but then the ceiling just looked messed up. So I was like, instead of showing the light in the frame, what we can do is put a light where the light would have been, where the bulb would have been, and then people would just assume, oh, that's a bulb, you know. And we ended up putting I believe this was the 200X at a color temperature of 3200, and then we have the lamp in the background just to light the background, because it was so dark when I was looking at it. And there we just put an MC inside a lampshade, and on the other side of the frame to the right, I have the Amaran 100 bouncing off of a shower curtain coming back just to fill in the shadows. And then we have the fog machine running up in the space just to create that tension and to create that moodiness that we were going for. So it's not a lot of lights that we used to film in this space, but I feel like we managed to get pretty much what we needed, just in terms of that look, to make it look good. And then on this, I believe I was filming on the 25. I was on 25mm on a micro four thirds. I don't know how much what the math is in terms of translation, because I know it would be different on a full frame, but for me this looked enough to hide pretty much of the space that we were in, not to show the things we didn't need to see. And yeah, it came out pretty good if you ask me. And then the idea with this wipe was this was going to be the beginning of the Oner. So the way it was, she would wipe it, and that would allow us to connect to her back as she's going up the stairs. One of the challenges that I had is in shooting this, we didn't want it to be handheld. The director wanted it stable, so we had to use a gimbal. So we were on the Ronin RS4, and the whole setup was just heavy, which made it difficult to frame. I think in hindsight, I would have either gone handheld or get a steady cam. I think it would have been a better solution than a gimbal. Like, in as much as I like gimbal shots like the next guy, I feel like they're very difficult because, especially if you have to maintain focus, I think with LiDAR it becomes better, but I think the way a gimbal just works sometimes is not good for narrative, just depending on your skill level, I suppose, as well. Like, but I really didn't like a lot of the framing that I was getting, because in this instance my goal was to have her head like she is right now in the frame, and then also it would have allowed us to explore the room that we're getting in, because I think this would have been good to do that. But it ends up being a very good frame, and yeah, we can talk about what's happening. So as we entered this room, my main lighting source became the sun from outside, and then we had two 300Ds from behind just shooting in the room, because ultimately you would end up seeing the entire space. So it was like we have to light it from far away, and just hope that there's enough light to help the camera. But it wasn't necessarily going to be about the sexiness or painting with light, but it was just about making sure we actually see what's happening. And one of the challenges that I'll show you that we were having was, and because of the sun and how it was working, is outside was overexposed and inside was underexposed, and we couldn't put lights inside to match the sun outside. And one of the things that we missed was on this shot, because of the sun hitting the wall, in camera it looked like it was going to be okay, like it's a streak, but that's an overexposed wall just because of how the exposure in the room is. What in hindsight we could have done is close down the curtains, put an ND filter on the window itself or something like that. But my goal then was to try and focus out, or like not frame it, but it's quite visible. So in shots like this, I was trying to hide that overblown wall. But also what I liked about it was working as lighting. It was helping, it was bouncing into the wall onto their faces. So which is why when I noticed it on operating, I was like, ah. And the other thing is we were only doing one take of each thing, which is a challenge, but it was very doable. In as much as I don't like the gimbal, I really like shots like this because it allowed us to have that dynamic of movement and just not to cut where, and then you're like, okay, I have to readjust the framing as I'm doing it. Like this one is over the shoulder, super dirty, too short, you call it whatever. But I really liked it because I would have framed it like this if I was just on sticks, and that was an advantage. At this part, most of the dramatic stuff has happened. We are now shifting the story, and I think this is where most of the fun that we had in filming this. So if you look at it, the outside has changed. This is because of the one, a lot of rehearsals had happened. We only had to do it once. Everybody had to know their timing in order for us to get it. So everything had to be done at the same time. And it took a long time doing rehearsals that the sun moved. So the room, the lighting, everything shifted. And then what we had to do was push in more light, but it wouldn't match. But I think it didn't matter at the end because people don't really haven't commented like they've seen that aspect of it. But in this instance, one of the challenges that I was having was pulling focus and controlling the gimbal. So in these instances, like I like it, but I would have liked to have less headroom than we had. But I also think it works just because a lot of times I think these are happy accidents where it's like it works for the story, it works for what we were doing and what it ended up being. It's a happy accident. It's not the intended thing to do, but I think ultimately it worked out just as I thought it would work out. When I was thinking about this shot, I really thought it would have been cool if we had fish in the fish tank, just to sell like, what are these humans doing? you know. And with this, what I liked also enjoyed, because I did some of the posts with sound, is just how you could play with the emotion of like, the first half is the music is quite different from what's happening at this point. For this, it's when I'm looking at this frame, some of the challenges that I have, with Sony, what it does is it paints things yellow, and then you sort of have to fight that in the grade. With Black Magic, it feels like it makes things magenta, and it's very difficult to take out. I think you'd need a pro colorist to really deal with it. But other than that, like I really had no problems with it. So yeah, that was it. It's a little 3-minute film. I think there were a lot of lessons that I learned in just filming a Warner, and for next time, things to think about in terms of the prep. I think one of the main things is to have, it's important to see the space you're filming in, but also just having rehearsals in terms of what you're going to be doing on the day, because I think if a lot of work is done prior, then on the day, all you're doing is just filming. That would be amazing. And to have that timing right between the actors and the camera, and everybody has to peak sort of at the same moment, the focus puller every moment, and having an understanding of just how we're lighting it in terms of if we're relying on the sun, where the sun is going to be, and doing everything being super intentional. I think that for me moving forward is super key. The other thing that I sort of noticed is, I think in a Warner, because of the way you frame, I think you have to have thought about a lot of these frames just in terms of which marks am I trying to hit, and where can I be to have the subjects in the frame just how I want them. Because the way that I was doing it, it felt like I was being freestyle more, and I really didn't like it, like just to freestyle it, because then it's difficult to understand what's happening. I also understand, you want to have creative freedom and be spontaneous, but I think if you go in with certain shots in your mind, then you're able to build from there rather than going blank in and trying to find magic where it's not. It's quite difficult. I'd say that the thing that I took out of this whole process was, it's quite important to understand the tone and mood that you're going for in post, so that you do it when you're filming. And once you have that locked in, it's quite easier. Communication is always key. I think communication with the actors, communication with the director, communication with your team is very essential. Me and my gaffer, we were speaking, and you're like, yo, I want this, I want that. And sometimes, you'll be frustrated because you can't express what you want. I'm someone who's used being a YouTube creator, where you're used to doing everything by yourself, and then when you're working with a team, it's like, how do I tell you what I'm thinking so that you understand it? And for me, those are some of the things that I'm still learning. But I think Warners are fun to do. You just have to know why you're doing it, and you have to be super prepared. That's the key takeaway from me, is preparation is everything. Also camera wise, like I always say, I don't really see the difference in cameras a lot. Like I can tell an Ari from everybody else, but I don't really see how different they are. Like sometimes, like when you're watching, you just like, it doesn't feel good. But in terms of usage, I think the Blackmagic, it was heavier than the FX3. Just the whole setup was super heavier compared to the FX3 that I normally shoot on. I think one other thing that I didn't have was, I'm so used to using the FX3, like just the way it tells you what levels you are at. I'm pretty sure if I sat down with the Blackmagic, I'll figure these things out. But like, how exposed you are, whether you are +1, +2, what's in focus. Your focus peaking is quite there. Whereas when I was doing this, you really didn't know, So there are those things where I think with Sony it helps you a lot, whereas with Blackmagic it doesn't. But that may also just be because that was the first day and first time of using this camera, so like that switch was not really easy. Um, Other than that, I don't really have much complaints about anything. Let me know in the comment section if you guys have any questions. Yeah, keep shooting, keep improving, keep working. I make these videos to hopefully give you some information, some of the things that I've learned. Yeah.